if you think disclosure is not going to happen this year, do you think it'll happen in the 2020s?
In this decade of the 2020s, yes, that's very likely. The reason we are sharing not long-term predictions, etc., is because we want to present you with the ideas you're currently dealing with. So if you're just sitting back down and saying, all of those things are going to happen this year, I'm just waiting to the 2020, so when disclosure happens, that's what I'm here for. Until then, I'll be in hibernation. You will put yourself on a different timeline where it will not happen. It's just that if you're dealing with the things that we just brought up, yes, then you're, depending how you're dealing with them, you increase or decrease the likelihood of disclosure later on. Where those people listening in on this, or perhaps listening later in on this idea of our current sharing our interest in disclosure. However, the general population of planet might be more interested in the other countries that we previously shared, or the cohesion that we previously shared, happening the socio-economic interpersonal relationship idea on your planet. That's what their focus will be on. And depending how well your entire collective deals with those energies, you will be more or less ready for something like disclosure. When it comes to open contact, will likely take about a century. So it's unlikely any of you will experience this in your current lifetime, or it doesn't mean that personal events such as what you're considering first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or even sixth, or seventh close encounter of those particular kinds are likely to happen to individual people, much more likely after so-called disclosure. But again, disclosure as a general process to the entire collective will likely happen more or less likely sooner or later, depending how your collective deals with those topics and ideas that we just brought up. And yes, we're aware many people don't like to hear certain ideas of conflict, something bad is happening, and just to ignore this and rather wait until nice things happen. But that won't happen that way. Because in order to have what you consider the reward, so to speak, you need to first work, then play, so to speak. Not that it's like a reward in the literal sense, you get a reward from the universe for solving a task. It's more like your growth happens to what you consider pain or strife. And once you've grown to a certain level, you're grown up, so to speak. You're aware how the world functions, you're as naive again. Perhaps. Very broad metaphor, but you get that idea, we hope.
I mean, again, I don't want to take up too much time on this topic, but you said contact is likely to happen in 100 years. I mean, really, it's going to take that long?
Open contact for the entire collective in terms of being integrated in the galactic society. It won't mean that your general collective should be aware until then very well of life on their planets, and there might even be different cultures that have open contact where ships are coming and going and people are aware, this region, there are ships landing and flying away. Like in your Area 51, that's so very well tracked through so many ideas, conspiracies, etc. In your disclosure movement, there are many such regions, such as this, or Antarctica, of course, and people being more aware of such ideas. That the whole society will be integrated in terms of you can all just buy a ticket to a star system, so to speak, the way you can now buy a ticket to a continent and fly there by airplane. Yes, that might take a century.
Okay,
and
yeah.
You're blowing yourself up in the meantime because you're half-sick.
Because we're what?
You're falling over your own feet, yes? Like you're handing a monkey a machine gun there right here, yes?
Okay.
Remember, it's not out all here, air is herring, we're all friends with each other, all you have to do is travel outside your planet and you will get hacked by everybody on the big spaceship and everybody will be happy. There are many factions out here that are fighting war against each other. Most people that we are aware of that talk to the West or wish we have physical contact all want to be diplomats between the light and the dark. And we're aware since our adventures and our connection to this particular vessel, this has made its own involvement in this direction, it's like those people approach us or most people out here are on one side or the other as far as they're still physical. As long as you're physical, there will always be sides in conflict with each other. And we currently do not deem you ready, and most out here do not deem you ready for open communication as a collective. There are individuals, yes, very likely many are really ready, and they will likely have contact after disclosure happens. So, as a general collective, there are still many on the planet that would create havoc or get themselves into trouble if they would travel to our star system, so to speak, if they are given open range, if their whole Earth society would be included in any bigger federation, there would be conflict which federation or the empire or whatever they wish to be included in, etc. Your so-called United Nations or your Bilderbergs or whatever are not forming one cohesive Earth governance and accepted by everybody. Most of them is done in secrecy. This is not a concept that's ready to be integrated in any higher advanced society, at least not full-fledged member. You're already somewhat a member through the slave caste system, but it's something else from what we're anticipating is what you're asking about, correct?
Yeah, correct.
You seem to be wishing to be face-to-face equal member of any larger grouping, or at least a recognized member in our hierarchy, where you're giving full range of your certain posts and more intel of what's going out here. In other words, you'll integrate more or less as just another planet in a larger structure. And yes, this will likely take about a century, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. Yeah, I mean, basically, I guess it depends on your definition of contact. I just thought, like, wow, like 100 years seems like a really long time before aliens would ever openly, show their faces to Earth. But yeah, I guess, like I said, it just depends on your definition of contact. But
full integration into a certain high evolved structure, such for example, the empire openly, not as a slave race, if that's possible, the or a federation for it matter. That might take more than a century over. We said at least a century.
Right. I got you.
Again, when it comes to disclosure, it depends greatly how your population will react to that. That's how anybody out there will determine if they want to integrate you at all or not. Some wish to wipe you out, including the empire. Some wish to continue using you as a slave, many in the empire. Also, some that are unaffiliated. Some want to include you as a full-fledged member, many in the Federation, some in the Empire. Some want to have nothing to do with you and completely disregard you, many in the Empire, also a lot in the Federation. And some are rather indifferent and just want to see how far you wish to come. That's probably the majority that are still on the fence, so to speak. But before full disclosure has happened, it's unlikely that anybody can determine such a confusing lot as yourself. Yes?
Right.
Which direction you will take and if you will ever be fully eligible and when that will happen. Focus again on the things we just brought up that are currently coming up in the right year. For simplicity's sake, we consider this to be tasks for 2019 or likelihood of events happening. But again, that's just an overlapping ideas we share already with the Yellow West idea that France should be already happening. It might stretch longer. The whole gender idea conflict might already be happening for longer, might stretch longer. This just being hotspot is you're determining in time. So much in years, decades, centuries. For us, a century is just what you might be a day, yes? In our big time. So for us, a little long, I understand many of you would physically leave your body. So for you, it would be another lifetime. Or hours, you would not experience this, the way you define yourself currently as a person. Or that doesn't mean that you physically, individually can experience first contact. It's those first contacts scenarios are already happening, and many of you have already had them, don't remember them, yes? Right. And likely you. And the more you remember them, it depends how you're reacting to remembrance will also determine if you will likely have them again consciously or not. And collectively speaking, you'll have to wait for a collective, but after what you sort of disclosure, it's more like you have individual context. But again, if disclosure happens, how it happens, how chaotic, etc., also determine how you will integrate those different ideas and topics you already shared. It's not like getting created by a person on a cloud somewhere, but it's simply the energy you have to work with, not to drive to a point where you'll be mature enough to deal with such.
Okay.
And like a couple of days ago, like President Trump was having an event at the White House where he revealed the official flag for the U.S. Space Force, and I was wondering, like, do you know why the U.S. is now officially establishing a U.S. Space Force, even though officially we don't even have people in space? I mean, are they trying to prepare us to slowly disclose the existence of our advanced Space Force?
well, depends who are considering they. Your current president might have some information. Obviously, he's not having the need to know from what we're aware, right? But some secret societies have had contact with us and others, right? They're much more aware of our presence up there and others up there. Has also established certain colonies, right? It's unlikely the president of your current country is fully aware of any of those Mars or Moon, etc. colonies by your own peoples from Earth, right? At least not to the same degree that some others that you might term Illuminati or whatever the fuck are aware of, let alone contracts or directions with beings out there. However, he mostly is more aware than the average person in your society, obviously, so he's privy to some information. It's likely that the person at least is willing to disclose something, and others in your government might be okay with it. They might have their own agendas, Project Blue Book, etc., correct? There might even be some, nefarious activities that they're okay with disclosing as long as it doesn't interfere in their own business, etc. Conspiracies upon conspiracies. We are not dabbling in those details simply because we don't care. We only care if people come up here and cause some trouble, right? Now, remember, everything is a reflection. So if you want disclosure, which again is likely to happen this decade, but only in conjunction with warlike scenarios, etc. Currently, again, could happen without war, could happen without disclosure, but currently those two things are likely to happen. But again, just currently, from what you're currently asking through your whole current situation on Earth, again, the corona, whatever the fuck, has taken over a lot from the strategy. Again, we're not going to go into details how this whole happened, etc. But trolling on details, there are general ideas, simply energy is being put out, including the energy of disclosure, right? But currently it's tied in the energy of trauma and destruction, war, etc. So more likely disclosure to war. However, it always depends what you're pulsing out. If you're disclosing more, you will live in a society that has more disclosure, correct? One more.
Okay.